this is what I look for. When I see a success, I'm looking for anything
to say that they didn't do it on their own?
Detain it, not this.
I would hope he would think about it and this would be in his mind, but I wouldn't actually know what another person is feeling.
Jay-Z just made the man claiming to be his son pay him nearly $120,000, and now that same man says he's afraid for his life. Everyone thought the decade-long paternity battle was finally buried, another win for the billionaire who never loses, but the silence that followed feels engineered, not earned. Within hours of the court's dismissal, Rymir Satterthwaite abruptly withdrew his case, posted that things were going on behind closed doors, and then vanished from public view while his godmother was hit with the judgment. The filings say the lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, the fees exact, $119,235.45, and the legal team called it decades of harassment. He called it fraud, a punishment for asking for a DNA test. In 2025, he said he'd fight until he won. By early 2026, he was posting about threats, tagging the FBI, and warning that it's not over. The official story insists justice was served, but why are the people who challenged Jay-Z suddenly paying him, going quiet, or disappearing? The leak suggests this isn't closure at all, it's containment, and the next revelation could finally show who's doing the silencing.
I don't have no felonies, I'm not crazy and none of that. It's like, I just want the truth, and it's so hard to get it from the courts, and it seems like Jay-Z don't want to say anything, so, I don't want to see him go down for something that, you could have just got taken care of. That's it.
The filings are public, but they read more like a warning than a victory. The order came down quietly in mid-July. Case dismissed with prejudice, all claims permanently barred, and Rymir Satterthwaite's godmother ordered to pay $120,000 to Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z. No hearing, no testimony, just a digital stamp in silence from the billionaire's camp. Within hours, the young man who had spent years begging for a DNA test posted that he was stepping back because things were going on behind closed doors. Then he disappeared. Messages to his old social account stalled. One by one, supporters who had amplified his fight began deleting posts muttering about lawyers. The official story says he withdrew voluntarily, but people close to him say he was exhausted and scared after weeks of what they describe as pressure calls and warnings that the case was destroying lives. The same week, his godmother's emails stopped entirely, her family telling local reporters she was reevaluating everything. On paper, the judgment looks procedural. In practice, it feels like an execution, swift, silent, and final. What makes it stranger is how little sense the timeline makes. For months, Satterthwaite had said he wouldn't stop until Jay-Z took a DNA test. He told supporters, "This is not about money, this is about truth." Yet, in early July, his own filings were pulled, replaced by a single sentence of withdrawal with no explanation. Court insiders say that within 48 hours, Jay-Z's legal team filed a motion for sanctions under California's anti-SLAPP statute, the kind usually reserved for people filing baseless harassment suits. The judge approved it without oral argument. Lawyers who've seen the order call it unusual, not for its outcome, but for its speed. The ink dried before the plaintiff even knew he'd lost. What's being whispered now is that this wasn't about stopping harassment. It was about setting an example. The sum, $119,235.45, isn't random. It's precise enough to look like accounting, not punishment. But inside the paternity world, it reads like a warning label. Challenge a king, pay the crown. By January, Satterthwaite was back online, furious. He called the ruling a publicity stunt and insisted fraud is not protected speech. He tagged the FBI and former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, saying he would appeal. He accused the court of shielding activity that is not based on law and claimed the anti-SLAPP defense was being twisted to protect fraud and underage relations. The phrasing caught attention, not just because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He never mentioned Jay-Z's name directly. Industry watchers noticed the change immediately. To them, it looked like self-censorship born of fear. He'd once spoken openly about wanting his day in court. Now, he wrote like someone under observation. Around at the same time, his godmother resurfaced briefly to confirm she was appealing a federal court ruling to ask whether courts should refuse to review claims when jurisdiction itself is questioned. Then she went dark again. No press, no interviews, nothing. It's as if the people who started this fight were suddenly swallowed by the system they challenged.
Never got anything, so why wouldn't I believe my mom? We could have been settled this, and it only takes a conversation and some words, I'm not a hateful guy. I don't hate anyone. I'm not after nobody. I'm not trying to see no one downfall, but this is just some things that just went through court, and they just expected me to just sit there and just take what they were saying. I can't.
The legal paperwork alone tells one story, but the surrounding noise tells another. Satterthwaite's supporters have pointed to the recurring phrase in Jay-Z's filings, decades-long harassment, and asked how a man in his early 30s could have been harassing anyone for decades. They note that every time the case resurfaces, new legal language appears, fabricated allegations, systematically rejected, contempt orders. Yet, no public record shows a single contempt sentence or penalty against him before this year. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's lawyers continue to insist he was not properly served, a phrase that to anyone outside law sounds like paperwork. But inside these circles, it means stalling. The impression forming now is that the process itself has become a strategy, delay until the other side breaks. In a matter that should have hinged on a simple DNA test, the only thing being tested seems to be how long one person can endure being dragged through procedural mud. What keeps the whispers alive is the pattern. This isn't Jay-Z's first brush with allegations that vanish under paperwork. In 2014, the mother at the center of the claim, Wanda Satterthwaite, said she'd had a relationship with him in the mid-1990s, when she was 16 and he was 22. Before she passed in 2016, she recorded a video urging him to take responsibility and submit to testing. That video never made it to court. Every attempt to attach it to filings was blocked on jurisdictional grounds. Later, when her son tried again, New Jersey courts barred him from submitting further paternity suits without prior approval. A decade of filings across multiple states has left a paper trail without a single hearing on the merits. Observers now say it looks less like resolution and more like containment, legal architecture designed to keep certain questions off record. And when the same judge who shut down the most recent case used the phrase, "without leave to amend," insiders read it as code. Don't come back. The more one looks, the more the personal overlaps the political. Just months before the latest judgment, Jay-Z and Beyonce were photographed dining with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner at a casino gala in Atlantic City. At first, it seemed irrelevant. Then online users began connecting dots. Instead of releasing statements, they dine with power, one wrote. Got it. Another commented, he always knew how to pick the right tables. To the public, it was another celebrity dinner. To those following the court saga, it was confirmation of influence stretching beyond the courtroom. The dinner came just as Lily Coley filed her federal complaint, accusing not just Jay-Z, but the New Jersey Attorney General's office of misconduct. Her case was dismissed days after that dinner photo circulated. Officially, the two have nothing to do with each other. Unofficially, the timing is all anyone talks about.
Sean had to take responsibility for what he did as an individual. Sean is the one who pulled that gun out. Sean is the one who shot. So he has to take responsibility for that.
What's driving the most speculation now is fear, not the legal kind, the personal kind. Several people who once spoke on record for Rymeer's cause have since walked it back, some claiming they were misquoted, others saying they just want peace. A family acquaintance says he received late-night calls from unfamiliar numbers after sharing court documents online. Another says she was warned by a mutual friend in the industry to stay away from this story. It might sound paranoid if it weren't for Rymeer himself saying in a July 27th video that he feared for his safety. The video vanished from Instagram within days. It's now circulating on mirror sites, clipped and grainy. Those who've seen the full version say he looked pale and shaken, repeating that line about things going on behind closed doors. The phrase has since become a rallying cry online, shorthand for whatever invisible force keeps swallowing this story whole. Still, the official narrative insists everything is transparent. Jay-Z's legal camp calls the case frivolous and frames the judgment as a deterrent against what they describe as a harassment campaign. They cite a history of false filings, wasted judicial resources, and misrepresentation. Yet, when reporters requested copies of prior contempt orders, none were available. The Administrative Office of the Courts confirmed that those records were sealed. Even more curious, the anti-SLAPP statute used in California typically applies to media defamation, not paternity. Legal analysts say using it in this context is rare and aggressive. One retired judge told a podcast host, "It's the kind of motion you file when you want to shut someone up fast." On paper, Jay-Z's team won the legal argument. In the public sphere, they've ignited suspicion that the courtroom is only one of several weapons at their disposal. There's also the financial undertone, always precise, always calculated. The fee award of $120,000 is not just reimbursement, it's a precision strike. The sum ensures the losing side is not merely silenced, but indebted. Satterthwaite's supporters say he doesn't have that kind of money and accuse the court of turning debt into a leash. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's net worth, last reported by Forbes at $2.5 billion, keeps growing. He's expanding sports management deals through Rock Nation, strengthening partnerships with LVMH, and renewing his agreement with the NFL. The contrast between a global empire and a man fighting for a test tube result has become the story's emotional anchor. Every legal win he secures makes him look bigger, and every loss Rymeer absorbs makes him smaller, until the whole saga starts to resemble an allegory about power itself.
So what happens now is this is simply a civil complaint. And in a civil complaint, it goes through the technical legal process. Now, the distinction, Jessica, between civil and criminal, of course, is that civil is for monetary damages, right? The system can only reward you with money. There's allegations that this 13-year-old is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, suffered depression, etc. So now you go to fact find.
Here's where the story bends. The same law firm that defended Jay-Z in this paternity case is now fighting a federal lawsuit accusing him of involvement in an intimate assault case alongside Sean Combs dating back to 2000. The filings list Celebrity A as Jay-Z. He denies all allegations, calling them heinous. But the overlap between the two cases, the lawyers, the timing, the sudden flurry of sealed motions, has set conspiracy boards on fire. People are asking whether the crackdown on Rymeer's claims was part of a wider effort to clear the decks before the Diddy scandal explodes. No proof yet, just patterns, suppression followed by silence, lawsuits withdrawn, settlements sealed. The sense now is that something larger than a family dispute is unfolding, a campaign to manage exposure before it becomes uncontainable. And yet, nothing in this mess feels finished. Rymeer keeps posting that, "It's not over until we win." Jay-Z's team keeps filing responses denying everything. Judges keep issuing orders faster than questions can be asked. Each step forward ends with a closed door, another signature, another withdrawal. The official story is clean, a baseless claim defeated in court. But every detail around it, the timing, the fear, the disappearing voices, suggests that what looks like an ending might actually be the cover story for something that hasn't even started showing its teeth.
And I'm not saying allegedly.
Oh.
I'm saying, Sean Carter, you're a piece of shit. Taking Pimp C wasn't bad enough. You just want to go down there and you want to just remove all of the balls from every real gangster in Houston.
Power like this doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts in habit. Before the empire, before the billionaire title, Sean Carter was already learning control the hard way, on the street, in boardrooms, and eventually in the halls of justice. He once bragged in interviews about learning business from the corners, about turning survival into profit. But the same instincts that built a dynasty also built a pattern. Confrontations that never reached full exposure, rivals that folded just before the breaking point. When he stabbed record producer Lance Rivera in 1999, he turned himself in, smiled for the cameras, and walked out with probation. When footage showed him striking a young fan backstage, his team said it was taken out of context. When singer Rita Ora tried to escape Rock Nation, she ended up sued for millions. The rhythm is always the same: attack, deny, control the narrative, move on richer. Now that rhythm echoes through the paternity story, through a court order that silenced a man who dared to ask questions. The difference is that this time, the consequences reach beyond his name. People watching the case start whispering that the old street methods never faded. They just wear suits now. Inside the industry, everyone pretends not to notice. The same week Rymeer's filings vanished, Jay-Z was photographed courtside, relaxed, laughing with executives whose companies depend on his partnerships. The LVMH deal for his sparkling drink brand still stands. The NFL partnership he runs through Rock Nation continues untouched. Even as civil cases connect his name to a broader investigation involving Sean Combs, corporate boards stay quiet. Insiders say that's not loyalty, it's leverage. A source from an entertainment law firm says, when he moves, everyone else checks their contracts. The fear isn't of guilt, but of association. To distance themselves means acknowledging something happened. To stay silent keeps the money flowing. So silence wins. Meanwhile, Rymeer's side keeps pushing its appeal, but each motion meets the same response. No standing, no merit, no jurisdiction. To the public, it looks procedural. To those who've worked under Jay-Z, it looks like cleanup. His image remains untouchable, and the higher the tower climbs, the smaller his challengers appear. What's being pieced together now are fragments that refuse to stay buried. A filing from 2022 in New Jersey warned both Rymeer and his godmother not to submit further claims without permission, a legal muzzle disguised as efficiency. The next year, another case in California labeled their pursuit harassment, granting Jay-Z's team the fees they later turned into a six-figure victory. That ruling became precedent for similar cases. A musician's former employee citing the same anti-SLAPP logic to erase a harassment suit. A producer referencing it to stop a breach of contract complaint. It's spreading like a legal blueprint for containment. He's building law around himself, one retired clerk says. Every case that gets dismissed becomes another wall. Even his current entanglement in Diddy's ongoing federal investigation sits in this architecture. Different charges, same pattern of narrowing the battlefield until there's nowhere left to swing. Behind the empire's gloss of family photos and Grammys sits a network of lawyers who've turned defense into art. Every motion, every sealed record, every quiet settlement is another brick in a fortress that was never meant to protect innocence, just to protect control. Outside that fortress, the narrative keeps cracking. Anonymous posts now claim Rymir isn't the only one who's been warned off. 2 other names appear in whispers. Former associates said to have tried bringing separate claims years ago. Both dropped them. Neither speaks publicly now. Their social media trails stop abruptly around the same time Rymir withdrew his case. Online forums are already filling in blanks. Alleged hush payments disguised as consulting fees, defamation threats buried in NDA clauses, even supposed links to the Diddy case where overlapping witnesses suddenly can't recall details. Nothing confirmed, but everything feeding the same suspicion that what's being defended isn't one man's reputation but a system's stability. Because if even a fraction of it unraveled, it wouldn't just expose a paternity lie, it would expose an industry built on silence and exchange. That's the shadow now stretching from a courtroom docket into the luxury boxes of every corporation tied to his name.
How do you know I'm not a gangster? Or used to be a gangster? I've been in the music industry for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, the industry's filled with gangsters.
Still, it's the emotional fallout that's hardest to look away from. People who once idolized him now whisper that the charm looks rehearsed, that the calm hides calculation. Fans still stream the music, but under every post, there's a fracture. Supporters arguing with believers, defenders drowned out by conspiracy threads about intimidation and missing evidence. The cultural machine that made Jay-Z untouchable now feels nervous. Even Beyonce's silence has become a statement, a steady absence interpreted as either solidarity or quiet resistance. Insiders from her team have reportedly been told to say nothing, move forward. Yet, the question spreading through both fan bases is the same. How long can the perfect image hold before the cracks become impossible to crop out? The more his side insists it's over, the more people sense it isn't. And now comes the part that never shows up in official filings, the whispers of what happens next. Federal investigators are said to be reviewing financial records connected to Combs' companies. Jay-Z's name appears in tangential filings, not as a target, but as a participant in events from the early 2000s. His lawyer, Alex Spiro, calls every allegation heinous and baseless. Yet, the overlap between these ongoing cases and the timing of Rymir's punishment has raised a new theory, that the paternity suit wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a liability. Clearing it off the table before federal subpoenas hit keeps the empire clean. Too clean. If that's true, then the judgment against a single man in Philadelphia wasn't about paternity. It was about preserving a billion-dollar firewall before the next scandal could burn through it. Every silence that followed starts to sound less like victory and more like strategy.
But after that major documentary comes out on Diddy, then you're going to start to hear more and more about Jay-Z and his nefarious.
So now the story sits between 2 forces, power and exposure, and neither looks ready to yield. The lawsuits, the sealed documents, the frightened voices, the luxury boardrooms pretending none of it matters. They all orbit the same center. A man who built himself from nothing now stands accused of using that same hunger to bury anyone who reminds him where he came from. Maybe that's how power works, or maybe this time it's how it breaks. What happens when the walls he built to protect his name start turning into evidence themselves? What if the people who vanished from the fight start resurfacing with proof? And how long can an empire built on loyalty survive when loyalty begins to look like fear? Tell me what you see in this: justice, corruption, or just survival? Drop your theories in the comments because whatever this is, it's not finished yet.